Welcome back to the ThreeCameramen podcast, and today we will be discussing and reviewing Spirited Away, the 2001 Oscar-winning animation directed by the legendary Hayao Miyazaki about a young girl called Chichiro, who, after her parents were turned into giant pigs, starts working for the menacing new barber at a bathhouse for the forgotten spirits of the world to reclaim her parents' freedom. On this podcast, we don't have Finley this week because of
He's
unknown reasons.
MIA. He is missing in action.
So instead of Finley, we have a special guest, Melissa. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Melissa. You've never met me before. I don't think I've been mentioned on the podcast previously, so here I am.
And as usual, we have Daniel.
Hello. You know, it's quite nice being on here every time because it's okay.
Okay. So I'll start with you, Melissa.
Okay.
I understand you're very into anime. So what are your thoughts on the film?
I think it's brilliant. I think that the visuals, the soundtrack, the design of the characters, everything is just immaculate in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. Just because I don't want to hear from Daniel right now, because I kind of already know his opinion. I'll go with me now. So this film was my first film, or no, my first, yeah, I think it was my first actually introduction to foreign films in general. Like my first non-English speaking film, apart from maybe a couple. I can't remember them. But this was my first Ghibli film, my first foreign language film, and I remember watching it. I think it was genuinely like this time a year ago for the first time, and I watched it. I loved it, but I remember thinking that some of the characters were a bit weird. I wasn't ready for its weirdness and how out there it was going to go. But I never forgot what it made me like feel. I think the atmosphere is so unforgettable, and how Miyazaki builds this world is something that I really admire and really love. And then I watched it again recently, and it's one of those few films I feel like where it is genuinely better on a rewatch. Like I can't. It was like just knowing what to expect with this round. It made it like such an amazing experience. I could appreciate the visuals more and the music, and yeah, this is a masterpiece. And I think one of, in my opinion, from what I've seen, Ghibli's best. Yeah. And Daniel, now let's hear your opinion.
All right, let's start this journey. So I saw this film for the first time roughly 6 months ago. I watched it on Netflix. I'd heard amazing things about it, right? So people like it's got the best picture Oscar. It's amazing. All the characters are like wacky or whatever. I like you wasn't prepared, but I think I don't think I took as much from it as you did, because at the end of it, I'm like, well, I don't get the hype, right? So I gave it like a 2 out of 10 or whatever. And
a 2 out of 10.
A 2 out of 10.
I think it was that low.
A 2 out of 10. Then obviously now I've kind of thought about it, and there are definitely more kind of positive aspects that I've seen from the film, but I still would nowhere near class it as a good film in my opinion.
Okay, Mr. Hobson Shaw enthusiast.
Hell.
Okay.
Point immediately revoked like that.
Right, okay.
I mean,
no.
I'm gonna just pretend I didn't hear that, and I think we should start with what I think. Let's start off with what we love at the film.
Do you want to get a different guest for the podcast? Because I can just leave.
Yeah, please just leave.
Yeah, someone that actually likes the film if you want.
No. Okay, so yeah. So I think one of the film's strongest aspects, like I said before, is the world building and how these characters are designed and how each one is so individual from the other, and how they sort of represent different parts of Japanese culture and mythology. And I guess I mean, Daniel, did you sort of struggle with this film because sort of the weird characters inside? I think I remember you telling me that at some point.
Yeah, I think that played a factor because this was the first Studio Ghibli film I've seen, or Ghibli, however you pronounce it. But so I kind of I got the idea that this was like anime and stuff like that. But I think it was definitely a surprise to me where you just have like, because it was going fine. I was like, oh, yeah, this is a good film for like the first 5 minutes, and suddenly just like suddenly just two people just turned into pigs, and I'm like, how has that happened? And then obviously they explained it, and they have like about greed and corruption and stuff like that. But I just think it was a big surprise to me, and it kind of, I think it tries to do a lot of things at once, where it has kind of the realistic film themes of like corruption and stuff like that with the parents, but also it's got a massive wrinkled head appearing out of a bath and turning into a dragon. And I just don't think those two things really combine to make a proper meaning in the end.
Well, I mean, I have some thoughts on what you just said, but I'll go to Melissa. So, Melissa, what are your thoughts on what Daniel just said?
I think all the weirdness is what makes it so good. Like, it's a unique film. Like, people haven't seen animated films that were that kind of out of the norm before, with those, kind of wacky characters. And I think that because they were so wacky, it was such a good and interesting watch. If it was just like every other film, like, who would want to watch it? Like, the visuals are amazing. The characters, every single one of them has their own personality. Like, there's so much work and effort went into that. It's just too good to discredit that because you find the characters a bit, a bit too out of the norm,
I feel like I think, well, I haven't seen all the Ghibli films. So the one from the couple I've seen, the ones made before Spirited Away, were always, like, they had loads of weird characters in them. I feel like this is sort of the peak of weirdness, and Miyazaki sort of incorporated all these sort of ideas he's had from like My Neighbor Totoro and all the other ones, and combine them to make this huge like sweeping world and make it so unique to everything else he's created. But I think, Daniel, what you just said is, well, I also don't agree. You talk about how tonally it's a bit off with trying to incorporate heavy themes with light-hearted animation, whatever. But isn't that what Pixar's basically been doing for the past 20 years? With like,
I still think
your favorite film is literally like WALL-E or something like that.
No, my favorite Pixar film. My favorite Pixar film is WALL-E. But I think I don't know. It might just be like the animation style, because I'm like, Pixar films are always like the animation is just like phenomenal in Pixar films, and I think that anime does that, but not in a way that I really enjoy. Like, it's not really an animation style that I kind of I want to say relate to, but it's not really like
I relate to the animation style.
I actually relate to WALL-E with a load of fat people on a spaceship. But yeah, I don't. It's tricky to say.
I know what you mean, but you are, But if anything, 3D animation is more distance from us. I feel like the features and the way humans move in this film is way more realistic than any of Pixar. And that's not me discrediting anything Pixar's made. I still like all their films are pretty much masterpieces. But I think Ghibli films or anime films in general just have that special uniqueness to them that make them so interesting to me. But I don't know what you think about that, Melissa, about animation styles.
I think it has like a more, it's not so realistic like as an animation style like Pixar does it. But I think that kind of adds to the fact that it isn't real. Like it really shows you, like, don't get so immersed into it, but it does convey real messages through it, even though you can tell it's not real life.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think one thing that the film does like pretty amazingly, which like seems a bit of a stretch from what I just said, but the one thing that makes the film stand out is the music, just the way, because you have a Pixar films which have very like orchestral kind of themes and stuff in their tracks or whatever. So it's like dramatic during their kind of climactic scenes, but then obviously in Spirited Away you've got kind of this like calming soundtrack even in like the most dramatic moments. So I wonder what you think of that, Owen.
Yes, I agree. I feel like the simplicity of the piano, just a simple piano piece, is really effective in conveying or like building the atmosphere of the film, what he has going for it. Because I remember, well, whenever I think about Spirited Away, I think about the visuals and the world and the people inside the world, along with the music, and that it's so unique to the film. Even though if you played it by itself, it would sound quite ordinary, but combined with the film, it works so well as opposed to these giant orchestral pieces you get with like Wall-E or Finding Nemo or whatever. Yeah. But
I also think it's great at being kind of it's great at being recognizable because it like I've like obviously like researched before this episode, but like I still recognized the soundtrack from Spirited Away. Like the first time I heard it, I was like, oh, well, I know what it's from. But but like I think that's a great thing about how it kind of makes the film more memorable, because despite me not liking it, there's still a lot of key moments in the film that I'm like, oh yeah, that was like it's more like the like the landscape that they kind of produce, especially in one particular scene, which is the bit on the train about like 3/4 of the way through the film. I think that scene was definitely one of my favorites, just because it has kind of this, it like really demonstrates the animation style of the film and kind of the beauty of the landscape that they created.
Yeah. No, I agree. We were talking a bit earlier about the meaning of the film, and I wanted to know your guys' thoughts on the meaning behind them. I have my own thoughts. I think there's a lot of things about false objects and false meanings, like there's false gold, false idols, false, I've wrote down here, false hope, especially. And yeah, I wanted to, Melissa, I'll start with you, your thoughts on what the film meant so far.
I think there's a lot of, well, when it comes to Yubaba, there's a lot of control going on there, like abuse of power, in my opinion. I mean, she loves to control and in a way dehumanize some of the characters by taking away their names when they sign a contract, and even controlling her own baby, which, you know, like, okay, it's her child, but it goes far beyond protecting. It goes to a level of where she just wants control over everything. And I think that's also conveyed through her putting that like slug inside of Haku to control him. Like she didn't trust him enough to just like, you know, give him missions, let him be. No, she had to take that extra step to prevent him from disobeying.
Was that her? I thought it was her sister. No,
it was her. It was on the seal, but it came out with the seal when the main character Chihiro, she gave him that little thing that she got from the river spirit, and then she squashed it. So then Haku was no longer under her control.
That's interesting. No, I thought it was the sister who did that. Oh, I'd missed that apparently. No, so I feel like this is me. I'm gonna read into this way too much and trying to find a meaning to it. I said this is me, like, yeah, this is a bit of a stretch. I feel like this is sort of teaching about the cruelty of the real world and how this is a very exaggerated version of it. You have these big giant bosses who are cruel and unforgiving and will have your name on the contract and control you for the rest of your life. You have these servants and workers who only care about the money and a lot about greed and capitalism. But I feel like what the film does so well is making it light-hearted enough for kids just to enjoy the face value of it, but adults still get something out of it as well. I feel like that's what so many films try to do, but they just can't do as well as this film did.
Yeah.
I feel like. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, no. I just.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Melissa,
mine's
you
a
go.
different point. Mine's a
Okay.
different point. So.
Okay. I was just gonna say, I feel like them portraying Yubaba as a negative character and then showing her kind of as a representation of all those big bosses in the real world, like you said. I think that's a very like child-friendly way of showing the cruelty of the real world. That's all I was gonna say now.
Yeah. So I saw the English dubbed version when I saw Spirited Away, and I believe both of you have seen both versions, so the original and the English dubbed.
Yeah.
I was just wondering kind of which one you basically preferred and why.
Japanese.
Yeah, Japanese.
Not really much to say about that, really. I feel like I don't know even this about for me. I mean, I noticed this more with. I feel like I said this a bit before the podcast started, but the subtitle, the English dub in this one is weirdly quite accurate compared to.
Yeah.
I couldn't watch My Name is the Yamadas, another Ghibli film, with the subtitles because that whole film is really like solely hand drawn. So the board is always white, so you can actually read the subtitles. So I had to do the English dub, but it was really inaccurate. But I don't know about you, what you think about Minister about the dub.
Well, I think the dub is like, okay. I think it's, it's still good. It's still accurate. But watching it in Japanese in the original language it was made in, it just adds that little bit more of like the, how can I say this? Like the authenticity of it. It just sounds right to me. It sounds more right in Japanese than it sounds in English to me.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah, so because I watched the English dub, I think that's another kind of aspect of why I liked a lot. Well, basically, I appreciated it less because I think so. So the whole idea of the film is about Chichiro and her kind of journey, and then she obviously changes from being quite timid and quite basically vulnerable or like weak, and then by the end of the film, she's kind of standing up for herself and stuff like that. But I thought that with the English dub, I couldn't get over the voice actor for that. I just found it it was so irritating the whole time, her voice.
I know you mean.
Yeah, it was just painful because of that, I didn't really like, there wasn't any noticeable difference because I was still just focusing on her annoying voice, just how dumb that was.
Understandable.
But,
yeah, no, it's actually funny you mentioned that. I watched after Spirited Away and loving it, I wanted to watch more Ghibli films. And I watched firstly My Neighbor Totoro. Great film, but the little girl I remember was so irritating. Her voice was so high pitched. It was insufferable.
It was like nails on a chalkboard. It was just it's not cute.
It's so awful, but that managed to not distract me from how amazing the rest of that film was. But I didn't notice that. You don't really get that sort of annoyance with the Japanese version. I feel like English, they try to exaggerate it more. I could be wrong.
Yeah.
I haven't seen enough Ghibli films to make a full assessment of that. The only other Ghibli film I've seen is I've seen My Neighbor Totoro, Spirited Away, Howl's Moving Castle, and My Name is the Yamadas. And Howl's Moving Castle is the one that came closest to replicating that sort of feeling you get when you watch Spirited Away, I think, with the music and the world building and the characters and the visuals. That film, the only thing I didn't get with Howl's Castle was the story. I probably wasn't paying enough attention. I didn't really follow it that well.
Yeah, it's such a long movie that it kind of, you can get a little bit distracted and you can miss like a little thing with it, and it kind of just
I also remember that film for me. I think I have the same problem with you, Daniel. This isn't, I just want to emphasize, I love Howling Castle, but tonally, I felt like the main character was a bit off. I remember she's a really optimistic young girl, and then she's an old woman who's really narcissistic and
Like,
all that stuff.
Realistically speaking, I would be in tears.
Yeah,
I would be distraught. Me as a teenage girl watching that, I was so frustrated with just how she reacted. I was like, that's not right. That's not how I thought she was going to react at all.
That movie does have Christian Bale in one of the voices in English.
Gosh.
It's especially amazing.
There was an interesting point you brought up, Melissa, about kind of the runtime of films, because Spirited Away clocks in at like just over 2 hours. I think it's like 2 hours 15, which is interesting for an animated film, because loads and loads of animated films, like from DreamWorks or Pixar or whatever, because they know that kids' attention spans are so short, they will aim for kind of around 1.5 hours, or at least like sub 2 hours. But like Spirited Away didn't do that, and for me, it still felt quite slow with that over 2 hour runtime. But I was wondering if you guys thought like the pacing was any better or not.
I remember when I watched it for the first time, I sort of, with long movies, I always get that sort of feeling, especially when I'm watching DVDs, I can't see how long's left. I hate it when I think it's going to be the end, but it's a whole other scene after that. I sort of got that with the first one with Spirited Away when I first watched it. I remember thinking something like it would end abruptly when they went on the train as like a weird sort of ending, like a sort of cathartic ending or whatever. But I'm glad they didn't. I thought that was the direction it was going, because that's how they sort of displayed it. But I feel like, again, watching the second time round, that runtime, you just don't notice the runtime, because you're so immersed in the world and the story that it's just going to completely by you. But yeah, that's my thoughts on that.
To me, it's like a relaxing watch. It's because there's a lot of, connotations to do with like water and rivers and stuff like that. To me, it was like a slow kind of ride on a river, like just coasting by. But it was relaxing to me. It was a good watch. You don't really feel it at all if you're really paying attention to it. It just is such a good watch. You don't mind the time.
No, I feel like, this is one of the few long films that could become one of my comfort films. I just watch when I don't have anything else to watch. I get that sort of with Whiplash, and I get that with other films that are quite shorter. Like the Nice Guys, whatever. But this film is so, I just can't, you can't get some of the images out of your head. I feel like I can't forget how I felt when I watched it, with the atmosphere and just how rich all the colours are and how bright and how much life is in this world that these animators create. It's really stunning to see.
I heard like a quote somewhere where it was like, Disney touches your heart, but then Ghibli touches your soul. It just stays there. Kind of, it's true.
It is true
for me.
Yeah. No. I think it's weird, because I wouldn't have got that if I watched when I was younger. Because I definitely got that with Pixar. I don't think I would have got that when I was younger. But I think the older you get, the more it does touch your soul, and not sound all whatever. But
I've seen a lot of people talking about when they were kind of watching this when they were younger, and they were kind of talking about how they were like initially scared by it. I kind of thought, even watching it like really recently, I still thought it had those kind of like sinister undertones to it, and just kind of, I don't know, there just felt like there was something off about kind of the whole thing. So I would never consider it like a comfort film, even if I liked it.
It's understandable. I feel like we talked earlier about the meaning behind films, and I think you were saying earlier, Melissa, this film, the reason why it's become so popular over the years, it came out in 2001 now. That's actually 20 years since it came out. And the fan base behind that has generated all these theories. Like the one I've seen that I kept thinking about is when Haku says that him and Chihiro will meet again in his river, his river spirit or whatever.
Yeah.
That will happen when she's dying or dead.
Yeah.
And that, I don't really think that's true. I don't want it to think it's true, but it has that effect on me. Like that, those theories make the film stick with me more. But I don't know what other theories you guys have heard about the film.
Well, there's a very concerning theory that I heard about it from some of the fans. Like I spoke to someone who is a massive like Studio Ghibli enthusiast, and they're like, yeah, I heard a theory that they like some of the people think that that the bathhouse was a brothel. It was like a metaphor for a brothel. I was a bit like taken aback, but I mean, it kind of does make sense when you think about Yubaba like taking the girls as names, like changing their names, giving them a new one, and just kind of putting them as like the lowest low in the bathhouse, like hierarchy.
I mean, there is the question of the legalities of that, but
exactly.
But I think we should swiftly move on. Because I don't know what that.
I don't really believe in that theory, so yeah.
So this film especially is obviously like loved by fans of anime and whatever, and not by me personally, but I know it's basically globally adored. But it was clearly kind of praised at the time because it won the Oscar for best animation picture. So that's quite interesting how it was kind of, because I think it was the first Ghibli film or the first kind of anime.
If I'm not mistaken, I think it's the first Japanese film ever, I think, to win a picture Oscar. I think for animation and live action. I think it's the first Japanese one and last Japanese one so far. Which is it's not great that that's real, but it's just a testimony to how amazing this film is and how it's spread worldwide. I think it's actually the highest grossing box office film in Japan of all time. I'm pretty sure. I might be wrong saying that. I'm pretty sure.
I mean, that speaks for itself.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. One of the things I remember when I was watching the film for the first time was I remember seeing No Face in one of the posters. I was like, okay, so that's obviously going to be the villain. And I remember watching it, and I remember, okay, yeah, he's obviously the villain, forgetting that Yubaba obviously exists. But I read this comment on a video. I read this comment that said, I'll get up now quickly. Where is it? Yeah, so No Face is not evil. He simply absorbs what is around him and reflects it back. And he explains that. And that I think is also goes to that sort of meaning. So like of the film that film has. So No Face is not a man. He's not a woman. He's not anything. He just absorbs and reciprocates. He's met with greed because of his gold, so he becomes greedy. He's not met with a sort of warm-heartedness and niceness from Sen or Chihiro, and then he reciprocates that. I don't really know what that means in terms of the real world. I don't know what you guys thought about that, but I think that's a really cool sort of detail. Yeah.
I think it has. Well, I read this that it has something to do with him being constantly alone by by absorbing like the people that he's around, like their type of energy. He's trying to fit in, to not be lonely, to not be alone. And when that doesn't work, of course, he gets angry as the greedy people got in the bathhouse, and he adopted their characteristics to fit in with them, but that didn't work on Sen to befriend her. And then he went along with her on the train ride to Yubaba's twin sister's house to be with her, to not be alone, because he didn't want to be alone, and that gave him a better influence when he was around her.
I didn't think about that actually. I feel like we have we have a lot of time left in the meeting, so I'll quickly make a point about the ending. And so Chicho is finally reunited with her family, and she's told not to look back by Haku. And then they go back to the car, which is now covered in moss and dust. The paint from the walls is all stripped. And I remember when we watched it the first time, I remember thinking, okay, a few months have passed, pretty big amount of time. But then I saw another comment that said it's actually been years because this certain type of moss doesn't grow for years. And that sort of adds to this whole world building that happened because it could just be time moves a lot slower in response to the real world in that world. Or it could just be that we're not shown a lot of when she works, or we're not shown a lot. But yeah, I think for me that ending was stuck with me a lot. But what do you guys think about that? Cool. So let's.
Well, no, I'll say that I didn't really think much of the ending, to be honest, because I didn't really think much of the film. I think by that point I was kind of over the whole aspect of the film that I kind of disregarded it as a whole. But
well,
yeah, I mean,
okay.
that's all I really got to say.
I think where we should wrap up this podcast. I can't. Okay. So that about does it for today's podcast. I hope you enjoyed. Before we go, I'd like some final ratings. I'll start with Melissa. Out of 10.
Like a solid 9.5, I'd say. It's a good watch.
And Daniel, I can't wait to hear this one.
That's a pretty high rating, isn't it? So oh man, I'm gonna get so much hate now, but I would give it a 3 out of 10.
Oh, you were just.
So do you want to move on to
yeah, no, I'm just forget that happened and just ignore it. I'm gonna give it a 10 out of 10. It's my favorite Jubilee that I've watched so far. Out of like the 4 or 5 I've watched, and it immediately cemented, like it told me immediately that foreign films are amazing and that led me to watch other foreign films, both live action and animated. And yeah, I feel like it's one of my favorite films, just full stop, I think. And yeah, it's a masterpiece. It's a masterpiece. But anyway, yeah, we hope you enjoyed. Please subscribe. We hope you enjoyed it. I said that already.
Let us know what to do next week.
Leave suggestions in the comments. And yeah, bye.
See you in the next one. Bye.
Bye. Thanks for having me.